In this video, we're going to talk about 6.2, Objective 2, where we determine whether statements involving probability calculations make sense. So our first question asks us to decide whether the following statement makes sense or is clearly true or does not make sense or is clearly false. Explain your reasoning. When I toss 4 coins, there are 6 different outcomes that represent the event of 2 heads and 2 tails. So let's go ahead and actually list that out here. Even though they didn't tell us to do that, the first option would be for all the coins to be heads. The next one would be for the first 3 to be heads and the fourth one to be tails. Next one would be to have heads, heads, tail, heads. Then we have heads, heads, tail, tail. Then head, tail, head, 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 tail, head, tail, then head, tail, tail, head, head, tail, 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 then tail, head, 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 tail, head, head, tail, tail, head, tail, head, tail, head, tail, 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 head, head, tail, tail, head, tail, 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 head, and finally tail, 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 tail. Oops, tail. So 2 to the 4th is 16 different options that I've listed out here. How many of them have 2 heads and 2 tails? There's 1 of them. There's 2 of them. There's 3 of them. There's 4 of them. There's 5 and 6, and that's it. So that's exactly what they just told us, was that there were 6 different outcomes that led to that were in the event that we were interested in. Did they mean for us to brute force this? I don't know. Maybe they just wanted you to intuitively figure that out, but I think we needed to make a chart there and show you that there actually were 6 possible outcomes here. We also could have done that with a tree. The trees actually get real big real fast. So if I started off with my first coin and said that it was heads or tails, my second coin would be heads or tails. And then third one is heads or tails. And then I usually don't use trees beyond 3, but we can certainly try here. Because they start to get in the way of each other like this. So, but I know if I get 2 heads here, I'm going to have to get 2 tails. If I get a head and a tail and a head and a tail, that's good. A head, a tail, and a head is also going to be good. A tail, a head, a tail, and a head would be good. Or a tail, a head, and a head would be good. And there were a couple other options in here, maybe that I didn't pick up. But again, that's hard to use the tree like that unless you get it spaced out very well where there's lots of space. I just like making the chart better if I can list everything out that way. All right, determine whether the following statement makes sense or is clearly true or does not make sense or is clearly false, and explain clearly. I estimate that there is a probability of 0.5 or 50% that I will sleep through my morning alarm at least once during the next 2 months. That statement does make sense. A subjective probability can be based on intuition, and it is reasonable to think that there is a 50% chance of the event described occurring, especially since they're saying that it's going to occur at least one time, right? One or more times. Determine whether the following statement makes sense or is clearly true or does not make sense or is clearly false, and explain clearly. Because either there is life on Mars or there is not, the probability of life on Mars is 0.5 or 50%. This is a gross error that people make a lot with probability, to say that if there's two outcomes, then they must have a 50-50 chance each. And that's just not true. The statement does not make sense, because just because there's two possible outcomes, it's not reasonable to assume that both outcomes are equally likely and that there's a 50-50 split. It's much more likely that there's not life on Mars because of lots of factors that we know about: how cold it is and the lack of atmosphere and all those types of things. So that's it for this video, and we will come back next time and talk about 6.2 Objective 3. See you for the next video.